Hello, back for more WeakAuras custom tutorial stuff. I'm hoping that the rambly style and completely unplanned stuff is actually useful for people. If people just want quick answers to how to achieve something, then the best way is really just to go and ask on Discord and get an answer. But my hope is that videos like this, where you see me make mistakes and figure things out, are actually useful in their own way, even if they're a bit slower. So we've got these nameplates that we made from last time, and I thought we might pimp them a bit, make them have a bit more info, and maybe see what else we can add to them. So first of all, the health level is actually pretty useless, so we'll get rid of that, and we can put in something that's a bit more useful, maybe like their level. And we'll need to grab this on this iterator. This only runs when we close WeakAuras, and when a new unit is added. I don't think we really need to worry about stuff leveling up and us adapting to that as it happens. And so again, we've made another custom field in the state that WeakAuras won't touch at all. It doesn't care about it, but it does let us use it directly like this. So now hopefully if we close it, you can see we've got the level numbers there. What else is useful? Classification maybe, so we can see if something is a world boss or another kind of boss. If I drag in a browser from Wikipedia, this is unit classification, and it gives one of these strings. I'm actually not sure what it would return for one of these dummies. So let's find out. If this is really useful, /dump will take whatever you put into it, pretty much, whether it's a table or just a function, and it'll return it all into chat. It's just your chat, not to everybody's. So unit classification of the target. Our target is this training dummy. Comes back as normal. Guess that makes sense. So say we wanted to add a little bit of text next to the level, which just indicates what kind of mob we're dealing with. I would actually do this by making a little table in the init. And then we'll get the different strings that it might return. We'll make each one of these a key in the table. And then we can decide what will actually be returned. So we could just return that word. In fact, if we do that initially, and then we'll come and change it after. So just like the level, we only need to check this once, so we can put it in these two functions. I suppose it's worth saying that, actually, if this gets too busy, like we're doing quite a lot of stuff in this, we could extract it out to a single function, and then just call that one function in both these places, so that we're not updating two places constantly. So far, I'm not too fussed about doing that, but if it gets any bigger, maybe we want to. Okay, so again we've added another custom field onto the states now, and we can just throw them straight into here. Oops. And hopefully, there we go, so say normal and the level there. But you don't really need that much information, so let's slim it down a little bit. And also, actually, let's colour the text. And that'll be useful to see escape sequences in action. So if you want to colour all of the text, so just the whole level text, then you can do that in the display options, just like normal. You just use the colour picker. But if you wanted to change just part of the text and not the other part, then you've got to do that with escape sequences. So say we want this to say WB instead of world boss, but we want it to be in red. The way to use escape sequences is within the string itself that we're making, use a pipe and C, and that tells Lua that we're dealing with a colour. We always need alpha first, and they can't be anything but full. You can't actually have different opacities for text. So all of these will start with FF. You could put other values in there and it just wouldn't change it. And then it's RGB with two values each. So FF0000 will be red. And then our text, and then we close that again with pipe R. Say we want a rare elite to be orange instead. And say RE. I'm just looking up some orange hex values, so I don't have to worry about it. Okay, so just googled some hex values for orange and it's coming up with full red, half green. It's kind of predictable really, but it's given us these in numbers. That's great. I was going to talk about converting that, but that's a bit beyond the scope, isn't it? So we'll just go FF A500. We'll use yellow for elite instead. same for rare. Normal will make green. And trivial and minus will make them grey. So we've got a table, we've got these words as keys, but we now just need to put the replacement in. So in our trigger, instead of putting in that classification directly, we'll use the classification that we're given as a key in our table, which is in aura env. Place it there too. And good, no typos. So there we go, we've got a green N next to our level instead of the full word. So this is a really useful concept that you can make a table of stuff in it, and it'll be created just once each time the aura loads for the first time, and then you don't have to have a table being loaded into local constantly in your trigger. I see that quite a lot in WeakAuras, and it really will affect the game's performance if you do it too much. So last time we made our target change colour. Well, it'd be nice to have the colour reflect the unit's class or their reaction. So instead, let's add a little target indicator onto the name side. So we'll add it to this %n. We've already got target being true or false. So it's just what little text indicator can we have for the target, and let's use that. So I'll put two little arrows in. And these we do need to update down here, I think. Then we can add that into here. Let's see if that's worked. No, I've messed something up. So I'm setting this twice kind of here, aren't I? So instead we'll make it a string from the off. Same there. This can go back to just translating directly from above. got some red text here, so let's see what that says. 29. I guess I've not closed something. Two ends here. It's always a derp. Hasn't changed though. Oh, of course. So actually, the target indicator is correct now. But of course, now we've changed it from a boolean to a string. In Lua, anything is true except for false and nil. So this state.target, even being a blank string with nothing in it, is still coming back as true and triggering this bit. I'll just comment this bit out for now. And here we go, so little target indicator, little chevron thing. Isn't changing, okay. Could it be that this worked fine with the colour change but needs to be added for this? Let's find out. That did something. And a spelling error. Okay, there we go. Well, that's interesting. So actually, yesterday, when I made this little section that updated on target, I didn't put state changed in, and that was the mistake that I made on the health, I think, earlier. Forgot to put the changed in. But that didn't actually matter for the animation that was running, which just constantly checks that without it needing to be updated by WeakAuras. I never knew that. So we've got a little target indicator, and that reclaims the colour of the bar that we can now use for other stuff. So we'll go back to the colour animation. And what we want to do is we want to know, we're going to need to do some checks in the animation. In fact, we need to know the class, if it has a class. We want to know if it's tapped, like we'll turn it grey if it's a mob out in the world and it's been tapped by somebody else. And we want to know its reaction. So if it's aggressive or neutral or whatever, these will be neutral, and that's yellow obviously. But we can probably gather the information just once in the trigger, put it into the state. In fact, I'll just, if I paste in some code that I've used in other things, this does everything that I just described, but it's maybe being a little bit wasteful because animations run every single frame, and this will be running all these function checks every single frame. So instead, let's grab all that info that we need in the trigger. And again, we're adding to this thing. It's making me more tempted to put it into a function. In fact, we could even go as far as just setting RGB values here in the trigger. Do it once, and then all we need to do in the animation then is just output the RGB values directly. So we can sneakily just paste this code straight in, and let's go through what it's doing. So first of all, it's checking if the unit is a player, and we want to change it from target to unit. And if it is, then it looks in a Blizzard table, raid class colors, and it uses the class name that we got to extract these values. But we don't want to return here. We just want to set local RGB. In fact, if we make these variables before we start checking all this stuff, then they'll have a value straight away, and we'll alter it by all this stuff. But if anything should fail in all of this, then at least we know that the values are going to be going through without nils happening. So then if there's, the unit is a player and it's got a class, then we want to set R to that, G to that, B to that, and we don't need to worry about the alpha. And we've got an else here. If the unit is not a player, then we want to check if it's been tapped. And if it is, we'll set RGB to these values. And if it's not tapped, then we'll go through to this bit, which will just get the unit reaction. So for stuff that's not a player and not tapped, we want to show whether it's, green for friendlies, red for hostiles, yellow for neutral. And again, Blizzard has got a table of colours that we can use for this. It's faction bar colours. So same thing. So now in our state, at those. And so this now definitely is getting huge, this thing, and it'd be nice to put it into a function because we're going to have to copy everything that we just did over into here. So let's pull all of this out, copy it. We'll go into init. So just like this table that we made, we're going to make a function here just once, so it doesn't have to keep getting remade in the trigger. And so we're going to need to send some information over from the trigger into this. First is the unit, definitely going to need that. And also, this the stuff that we've copied out is setting states, and the all states table isn't going to be visible to this function in init. So we'll have to send that over as well. I should say I'm actually not perfectly sure that this is all going to work, but we'll give it a go anyway. So instead of all of this stuff here, I think we can, what did I call it, unit checker, send the unit and all states in, and I don't think we need to bring anything back. Let me just check. So that unit and the states table will go in here. We're checking if it exists. That's probably unnecessary, but it's fine to stay in. We're grabbing all these values, setting R and G and B, and then we're adding a state to all states. This should be okay, I think. So, same here, when a unit's added, we can just run the function we made. Let's find out if it works or not. Seems to. Pretty good. Let's just check if we remove and add nameplates. Yeah, great. And also we've got the yellow colour, which is what we wanted. Hang on, why have we got the yellow colour? Did we set that already? Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is left over now. We can get rid of this. We don't need it to be checking every single frame like it was for all of that information. We're checking it once in the trigger or in that function. So now if rm state and rm state, let's just check that there are some values in there. And this will need an alpha value as well, so we'll just throw in a 1 as well. These animations really don't like having no information being returned from them. I think some are kind of okay, they'll just return default values, but I'm pretty sure colour is one that will complain. So a good way to handle this is if you put any stuff in an if, then if it doesn't happen, then just have this return that will return the default values, and that should keep you safe. Hopefully then we've still got yellow things. Brilliant. And now that texture is offending me. I like blank ones personally. Call me crazy. Okay. I guess these don't go red when you attack them. No. Trying to think of a way to check for non-neutral nameplates. Maybe there's some red guys down here. No, maybe not. Oh, I just noticed we've got icons there as well, which we could maybe use for something. Maybe we could put portraits in those icons. I'll tell you what, while I remember, I got a little bit of criticism for having all my different events that are coming into this trigger in separate ifs. I like it in a sense of neatness, having each of these things in their own little bucket of code. I think is really neat, but it does mean that, say, this is the event that comes in, it'll do what it needs to do, and then it'll go and check if the event was also called one of these things, which obviously it isn't because it was called this. So it is a little bit inefficient, and we solve that by having all these be else ifs instead. And that end can stay there at the end. So yeah, it's still just as neat, isn't it, really? And it is more efficient. So I was talking about maybe using the icon, but this will have to be a little bit sneakier, I think, than just setting the icon, because there's not going to be a texture associated with these things. We need to actually grab their portrait, which I'm just going to Google what the function was. Looks like set portrait texture. Okay. And so the icon on the side of this of all WeakAuras bars is a texture frame, so we can just kind of hijack it. Let's make sure that I was going to say that we've got access to the unit ID in the state, but actually it is the state's name, which is the clone ID in WeakAuras. So maybe we can just use that. If actions on show, so each time one of these is shown for the first time, we maybe can so the path to the texture would be auraenv.region.icon, and the unit ID hopefully is carried in auraenv.cloneID. It would be nice if it's that simple, but let's find out. Nope, not that simple. Have we got any errors? On line 20, I think that's an old error actually. In case it is an old error, let's just close WeakAuras again. Oh, okay. Ha. Interesting. So if they're hidden and shown, they do get the right little portrait. Got there ugly, but okay, they're there. So what this means is that on show isn't actually run if the aura is visible as we close WeakAuras. And that was happening in this section here. So I guess the answer might be to force it at this point. But I'm really not sure that the state is created at this point. Well, let's find out. I think this will probably error. Yeah, it's definitely going to error. Okay. Yeah, there we go. It's not even creating stuff anymore. So yeah, this is because at this point in the trigger, we've sent the information off to unit checker, to our function, and that has created a state in the all states table. But we've not returned true. WeakAuras hasn't had a chance to actually go and create the clones from that state information, and we're trying to use it already. I'm trying to think if there's a neat way to do this, because having this in actions on show is super neat. It's like one little line and it's doing a bunch of stuff for us. And the only ways I'm thinking of right now are a little bit kind of annoying and convoluted. So let's go ahead and do it. So if we make a var in aurenv just called flag, we'll set it to true in here. So it doesn't exist anywhere yet, but the first time we close WeakAuras, this event will fire, we'll do all this creation, and we're setting something called flag to true. Now, if we then react to that flag being true somewhere in an every frame function, then the next frame that runs that sees that flag is true can run some code for us. So this is what I mean by it being a bit convoluted. We've got some code running every frame here. We can check if aurenv Yeah, this isn't actually going to work for more than one thing, but I'll go through the process anyway, and then we'll have to probably fix it. So if that flag is true when we come into here, then we want to set that portrait and unset the flag. Nil or false. Let's just make it false. And then close that if. So yeah, but we set this aurenv flag on the whole aura, not on the clone. So my guess is that when we close WeakAuras now, one of them will have a portrait and the other won't. Or maybe none will, and it'll be erroring horribly. Let's find out. There we go. That's predicted. So the first one goes through, sets its portrait, unsets the flag, and so this one never gets told to do that, and then we'd have to hide and show the nameplates. So even more convoluted now. Instead of adding aurenv flag, we put it in the state. Oh, this is more code than I really wanted to do for just some portraits. So instead of flag, let's call it something a bit more useful, like portrait. Set it to true as we make the each clone, And then in animations, if aura env state dot portrait, then set it, and I'm not 100% sure if we can set a state value right here. So what I'm going to do, just planning ahead, is throw a print into here. It should run once for each clone that's made, but if it runs every frame, then we know that this line here isn't unsetting that little flag that we made. Let's find out. No, that's pretty good. Okay, excellent. So in fact this is now doing the job in animations, and this is wasted code. It's just doubling up, I think. Yep. That seems to be working fine. So these portraits are pretty fugly, but at least that's how you do this kind of stuff. So let's get rid of the print. So easy to forget leaving those prints in, share away, go, loads of people download it or import it, and then you're stuck with spammy people's chat. So we've got bars. Let's just go through it all. We've got bars. Ha! There's a red one underneath somewhere. They show which one is targeted. They show the reaction. They show the classification and the level. Where's the portraits gone now? I guess that the on show code was still doing stuff. Yeah. Not really sure when, but that's fine. We'll put that back in. Seems to be okay now. Oh, well there's a thing. We could add if they are marked with raid marks. And we can still do all this within the text that we've got, because you can add textures into text. So we are going to need an event for this one as well, another one. There's an event called raid target update. It rings a bell that they don't. It doesn't fire when they get it removed. Oh no, it doesn't fire when they die. It does get fired when they're removed, so that's okay. So raid target update. Writing another event into this long list. And we're also going to need to check when we first encounter all this stuff, so we'll need to add this raid target check into the main function. Let's do that first. I think it's called raid target index. Let me just check. drag the browser in again. It's useful to see this. So get rate target index, you give it the unit that you want to check, and it'll return one of these numbers for the type of mark they've got. So this mark will be a number value or nil. I think we can work with all of that. So mark equals mark. In fact, no, let's not just make this a number. Let's make this the actual string that we're going to use to insert into the text. And for this we're back to escape sequences. And just looking up the thing that Blizz do with these. So they've got a table called icon list that's got strings already made up for these things. So for RAID Mark 1, I'll just paste it into here so you can see it. They've got a string like that. So if you checked for the table icon list 1, you'd get returned this string here, which is already formatted. The pipe T means that you're starting a texture, you're making a texture, and then this is the path to that texture. What's 1? It's a star, I think, isn't it? And then we'll have to add a little bit on the end after this colon. So we can do exactly this. Icon list. Instead of a number, we're going to use mark because it's either a mark or nil. Checking a table for nil isn't great. So instead of setting it here, we'll do it up here. Mark equals mark, and so if it's got a value, if it's not nil, then icon list mark, and then we'll put the little bit on the end. This will make it the same size as the text using a 0 here, and then pipe little t to close it down, or an empty string. So just to go over this, we're getting the RAID target index, which will either be a nil or a number, and then the next line we're going to set this same value. If it's not nil, then we'll grab the value from that table, make a little string out of it. If it is nil, then we're just going to make it have the value of a blank string, so at least it won't error out. So now go back to this, make that our string that we made. Now I think we need to do this elsewhere as well, so we'll copy this little section back to the trigger, and when the RAID target updates, I think it might send the unit in to that event as the first arg. So if there is a state for that unit already, then this little bit of code back, and we'll set the mark value to this new value. And then we'll remember this time to set changed as well. So hopefully that's everywhere that we need to set this thing up. And if we add another thing in here, so we've got another custom field on the state called mark, so we're just inserting it into the text along with all this other stuff. Fingers crossed. There we go, we've got a little skull. And so if we remove the skull, oh, it doesn't update. So this is what I was saying about the event doesn't fire when it's removed. It's not just when they die, it's when it's removed as well. Well, that's a pain. Because that means really we're going to have to check it on every frame, I think, to see if it gets removed. So this will handle still something being added. In fact, let's just make sure that it does. No, okay, so that bit of code isn't firing at all, actually, so maybe the event's just fine. Maybe it's not sending unit in. Let's print units and find out when it's firing. Okay, so yeah, the event's firing, but it's printing out a nil here, so it's not actually sending a unit in at all. And I also just noticed that our portraits are unsetting when I target stuff. Look into that as well. So we're not getting a unit into this event. So instead of that, we'll iterate. So this is going to go through our all states table, so any nameplates that we've currently got created, it's going to iterate through all of them. For each one, we don't need this anymore. For each one, it's going to check what the current RAID target index is, and it's going to set the mark and set change to true. Let's see if that's any better now. There we go. And this one too. And just check that it's got all the different marks there. But we've lost the portraits. What the hell's all that about? Got no errors, so it's not an error-y thing. But it happened when I targeted something, I think. So we've got them here, and if we hide and show them, they're there. When I target, they go away. So what's happening when I target that's removing those things? Well, we're running this on player target changed. And this is changing state changed. Maybe anytime we change state changed, we should also reflag the portrait. That could be right, actually. So when state change happens, WeakAuras is going to redraw the whole bar, in this case the whole aura, including the icon, which it thinks should just be a question mark, but we're kind of overriding that by setting the portrait. So now anytime we do state changed, we're also going to have to do state, what do I call it, portrait equals true. You can see how quickly those little changes, like trying to add the portrait in, spin out into other stuff. Don't need to do that on removed. And here as well. Let's see if that's helped. So now changing target keeps the portrait. Brilliant. And we've got marks being shown. So another thing I wanted to do was some sorting. How long have I been going now? Quite a while. Okay. So we've got these things, and the bars are just, the value of the bars is their health. We've decided not to actually see the health levels, the numbers, because that's mostly pointless for nameplates. But still, the bar itself will be the health. As you newt them down, that bar will lower. But you can't order in the group by that value inherently. Where's the sorting option? So sorting is ascending, descending and hybrid. We can't do hybrid with TSU. There's no way to select specific clones to be selected. So we're just, we've got ascending, descending and none. Ascending and descending will work just fine if you've got timed TSUs. So say you've got a whole load of cooldowns in a TSU, you've got a whole load of clones that are all cooldowns, set it by ascending and they will order themselves by which one is going to run out first. You know, it orders by expiration time. But you can set sorting to none. And what that will do is it will look for a state.index value, which can be a number or a string, but it mustn't be either. So you really shouldn't have one state use a string and another state use a number. I think that'll just cause an error and completely fail. But if they're all numbers or all names, then it will sort by those things, by strings rather than not names. So what practical application can we do for some sorting? Maybe, okay, this could be quite a large added project, but maybe we check their range and order them by how far away they are, which one's closer to you. Yeah, let's get into it. And in fact we could maybe add some kind of a range indicator. We'll see. So first of all, we're going to check the range, which you really need to do very often. There's no event for range changing because you can imagine anything that's moving. If you've got some mobs moving and you're moving, literally every frame there's going to be different range values. So we're going to add another thing into here, and it's going to be called frame update. That's actually a pseudo event made by WeakAuras that fires on update, and on update is your FPS, like every frame. But yeah, it's called frame update if you need to add it into stuff. So if the event is frame update, if it's one of these things. Then we will get their range. Now WeakAuras recently added the lib range check, so there's a default trigger now for range that you can use, but because we're in custom we can't use the default trigger, but we can just borrow the WeakAuras function that they've made. And we're going to have to iterate over our states again, so just like above in the raid target thing. This is where stuff gets inefficient, it should be said. This is stuff you really should only do if you need this information. And you should do as little as possible the rest of the time. So we don't have unit position in any useful important content anymore, any raids or stuff like that. You can't use unit position to get very precise values. Please killed that. So what we're left with is checking a whole load of items to see if they're in range, and spells and stuff, and that's what the lib does. And that lib returns the minimum possible distance between you and the unit you're checking, and the maximum possible. So, you know, there's a range, and when you're close to things, that range is actually quite narrow, like just a couple of yards, but when you're further away, it's mostly 5-yard range, I think, between the two. So, with this info now, if we directly set the state index to that min range, which should be returning a number, and then set state changed to true, and while I remember, set the portrait as well, because that's going to undo itself. Then hopefully maybe we also need to set something else. Oh, and we've got some red text, so let's find out what the red text is first of all. Neither then. Basically, I've messed something up. What have I messed up? On line 46. Oh, geez. So 4, not if. Derp. So yes, there is another field in the state that WeakAuras does recognise and use, and that's resort equals true. I'm not sure if this is only used for when you're using ascending and descending, or if it's also for other stuff, but we'll set it to true anyway, so that hopefully now we've set the index to the min range, we've made sure that it can resort, and on the group setting we've got sorting to none, which means it will try and use that index. And let's see if that does it. I'll mark one of them so we can see the difference. As I move past, it doesn't change. Okay. Also not causing errors, that's something. So let's find where the problem is we'll throw in a quick print just to make sure that this is actually running every frame. So this should spam chat now. Good. So we'll print min range, just check that that's actually getting a value on every frame. So again, this should get spammy. Yep. We'll just set resort to true here as well. And I'll also just check that it is called resort and not something else. It is, yeah. I also just want to check that we are being returned a number value and not a string that looks like a number. Sure we are. Number. There we go. So I am a little mystified actually. Oh no, it's changing. Okay, maybe I just was equidistant at that point. So there we go. We can see if yeah, that's marked. So I'm closest to the skull right now. As I move further away from that and closer to the other one, it flips over. As you can see, at this range, there's actually quite fine the difference. Further away, it's much less granular. Maybe we can see, maybe we can see that here. Yeah. Okay, but that's doing basically what we wanted. It's resorting based on the minimum distance, which is about as good as we're ever really going to get. But it's worth saying that is really expensive to do that. We're running every frame, and it's a fairly small function. I suppose the lib is doing quite a lot, so that's probably relatively expensive, and doing it every frame, and it's doing it on every state. So say you had 40 nameplates around you, it was a really busy moment, it would be checking that function on every single one of those nameplates, every single frame. So in fact, we could just add in a little throttle to make sure that it's not running quite that often, but still running, you know, often enough to be useful information. So this hopefully will just be a little throttle. Basically, we're going to use a variable in our env called last, and each time we run the code, we're going to set our env last to the current time, and so then the next time it comes through, get time minus or env last will be a very small number, so it won't pass this check and it won't get run again until it's more than 0.4 seconds since the last time it ran, at which point it will come into this bit of code. It will set this value of last to the current time and start all over again. 0.4 is probably a little bit not often enough, really. Let's just make sure that's still happening. There you go. So there'll be a little bit of a delay. You could see earlier when I was doing this, it was happening really instantaneously as I moved. Now there's a little delay. And so you would use one of these throttles and you would set that time to whatever you needed for the accuracy you needed. So that's probably a good place to leave it for today. We've added a whole load of stuff to this, really, it should be said, totally useless TSU WeakAura. This is tutorial stuff only. I don't think there's really a case for having all your nameplates listed out like this. But I'll put the what we've created on Wago so that people can have a look at the code there. And hopefully this has been useful. Please do get in touch on Discord or whatever if there's any useful info that I can give on WeakAuras, or if there's any requests for stuff for me to do in future. Thanks, bye.